Welcome to Inside City Hall's coverage of Decision 2012. 20 years ago, Nydia Velazquez was first elected to Congress from a newly drawn district. Since that time, she's become the highest-ranking Democrat on the House Small Business Committee and a senior member of the Financial Services Committee. Those accomplishments, however, have not stopped three fellow Democrats from challenging her in a Democratic primary in a district that includes parts of Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens. In advance of next Tuesday's primary, all four candidates now join me for a debate. We welcome Congresswoman Nydia Velazquez, City Councilman Erik Dilan, economist Dan O'Connor, and Occupy Wall Street activist George Martinez. Welcome to all of you. I want to get a little bit of business out of the way. That's just some very technical sort of stuff. We have a reapportionment. The lines have been redrawn. You live in Red Hook, but you've been sort of drawn out of the district. What would be your plans if reelected?
Moving into my district.
Okay, just making sure of that.
Sure.
And you're sort of close to the line now, right?
Only 2 blocks are not in my district. The entire Red Hook community is in my district.
Okay. I had a related question for you, George. The papers that you filed with the FEC give your address as Bainbridge Street in Brooklyn, which is pretty far outside of the district. What would be your plans if elected?
Well, the district is 30% brand new territory, and recently I was displaced because of rising cost of rent from Sunset Park. My plan is absolutely to move back to the district that I was born and raised in if elected.
Okay. Let us talk about your tenure. You have been there for 20 years, and I guess the easiest way to frame it is, what haven't you done in 20 years that you would be doing in the next 2 years?
What I have done, I have given this country, particularly Latinos, so much pride in the sense of working to get my friend Sonia Sotomayor be part of the U.S. Supreme Court. So finally, Latinos in this country could say that they arrived to the highest court in the land. I have worked for the last 2 years as chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus on 2 fronts to pass comprehensive immigration reform. We didn't, but we passed the DREAM Act, and it took a lot of work with me and Congressman Gutierrez, working to create and foster bipartisanship, because we believe that the immigration system is broken and that it requires a response not only by Democrats, but by everyone in Congress. And I have worked to increase affordability of housing in this country together with Charlie Rangel. We passed, despite the fact that there were attempts constantly by the Republicans to repeal the low-income housing tax credit. That provides leverage for housing groups and for local governments to build affordable housing in our communities. I represent one of the highest concentration of public housing in the nation, particularly here in New York City. As a senior Democrat on the Housing Subcommittee, I have worked tirelessly to procure and secure federal resources for New York City Housing Authority.
So out of that list of priorities, in the next 2 years, what would you be doing that hadn't gotten done?
Still, as the ranking on the Small Business Committee, the #1 issue that this country is facing right now is the economy. How can we get this economy back on track? And I'm going to be working together with the president in making sure that we pass legislation that contains different provisions that when you take all of them together will have a multiplier effect, such as providing different financing options for small businesses. They are the job creators. And right after the almost collapse of the financial system in this country, capital markets, the banks moved to tighten credit standards. So capital was not flowing to small businesses. And we worked with the administration to lower the cost of small business loan financing for small businesses and to incentivize banks to do what they need to do, and that is to provide access to credit to small businesses.
Okay, well, and now I want to ask the other three of you sort of the flip side of that question, to identify something over the last 20 years that the Congresswoman has done or not done, where you could say you would have taken a different path. And we'll start with you, Dan.
First of all, I acknowledge that the economy is certainly a major problem in this country, but I think the biggest problem is the fact that money controls policy in Washington. It doesn't matter what I want to enforce or what I want to accomplish in Washington, because at the end of the day, whoever writes the checks in Washington writes the policies. That's the biggest problem in Washington, D.C. And until you get to the core of that issue, everything else is secondary. And this is what I want to go and I want to fight for when I get to Washington.
Do you think the Congresswoman hasn't done enough in that regard?
Absolutely. I don't think she's done anything to curb the way that money influences policy. In fact, I think she's been engaged in that, and I think that she gets a lot of her campaign donations from lobbyists and Wall Street and big banks.
George.
Well, first of all, I wanted to celebrate the congressperson for her 20 years of service. I think it's worth noting that she has been an important figure in our community, and she is correct that she has been a giant to the Latino community, and I want to acknowledge that first and foremost. Specifically, my candidacy is built around the premise that we need to get money out of politics by engaging voters to get back involved in the process. What we know is that we're in a district, brand new, 70% of the district is what was the former 12th, and we do have some of the largest public housing projects anywhere else in the country. We also know that voting turnout is so incredibly low. It's part of the reason that they're disconnected. There's a disconnect between residents and the suffering that they have and what's being articulated in Washington, D.C. Consider that 43% of our district is Latino. And consider that the reality was that immigrant groups and dreamers across the country were critical of the congressperson's tenure as the chairperson of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus because she was slow to move toward supporting the DREAM Act, holding out for comprehensive immigration reform until the Republicans took control of the House and then went on the road tour with Gutierrez. And that's appropriate. But the reality was we need progressives who will be unwavering, moving forward, not blinking an eye, not just holding the line in the face of Republican attacks on the things we hold most dear to us, the services that our community needs.
Okay, Councilman.
Oh, well, we could just go to the last term. Certainly, I've made public that I would have supported the banks and the country and the financial system and some of the bailouts towards these institutions. It was necessary to save the American economy. I would have been forward trying to press for the homeowners and the small businesses to get their share of the economic recovery as well. I think one of the opportunities that was missed during the last stimulus was to get the banks to use the money that was injected into their institutions to have homeowners in the district refinance at the current rate. It would have saved thousands of homeowners from foreclosure. The rate was about 4% or less about that time. I think that was a missed opportunity. She even said herself, credit didn't flow to small business, and the whole purpose of injecting this capital into the banks was to keep the economy going. So what happened instead is that the banks started trading with each other because it was more profitable to lend to small businesses and have jobs and the economy growing. That's why I believe the unemployment rate is what it is today.
Well, let me give you a chance to respond.
First, I passed a direct lending bill that passed the House with over 300 votes in the peak of the economic crisis, 2008. The Senate didn't take it on, okay? Because I proposed a new way to deal with such an economic crisis and the fact that banks move to tighten standards and because large banks traditionally do not support financing for small businesses because those loans are not profitable. So the type of loans that are needed to help small businesses are the smaller loans less than $150,000. So I proposed to create a program to allow for the SBA to fill the gap and the vacuum that existed, and then 18 months later to move and sell those loans in the secondary market. When that didn't pass and it didn't work, and we saw after they got the help from the federal government, the financial institutions, and you could check my record as a member of the financial services. I chastised Secretary Paulson and Secretary Geithner because I told them unless we put provisions, specific provision that I proposed through an amendment that will require for them to lend to small businesses, that it will not happen. And it didn't happen. So what happened next? We put a small business lending bill, putting aside $30 billion that the Fed will lend cheap money to community banks, and after all, those are the banks that lend to our communities, and that they will access that money and that will use that money just to provide financing options for small business. And by the way, you know what happened? I lowered the cost of those small business loans guaranteed by the federal government. I increased the guarantee from 75% to 90% to incentivize banks to lend. And you know what? Traditional lending didn't take place to help small businesses, but we injected $27 billion in loan guaranteed by the federal government. We will not know where this economy will be today if it wasn't for the role that the Small Business Administration played. Those were my provisions. Those were the work that I did in the Small Business Committee, working with the president.
Okay, difference of opinion there. We're going to take a short break now. We'll be back in a minute, and at that time, we're going to let the candidates ask each other a question. Stay with us.